I died on a Tuesday. Not the romantic kind of death you read about in novels. No final words of wisdom. No tearful goodbyes. I died alone in a studio apartment I could barely afford, staring at a stack of collection notices that had grown taller than my hope. The last thing I saw before my heart gave out from the stress was a text from my sister-in-law, Michelle. Stop being dramatic. You endorsed the loan. This is your responsibility too. I was 34 years old, and I died owing $847,000 for a business I never owned, never profited from, and never even believed in. The heart attack was quick. I remember thinking, bizarrely, that at least the debt collectors couldn't follow me to hell. I was wrong about a lot of things. When I opened my eyes again, I was 29 years old, sitting in my childhood bedroom. And my mother was calling me down for Sunday dinner. The disorientation was immediate and total. I stared at my hands, younger, the skin smoother, the small scar from the cooking accident I'd get next year not yet present. My phone sat on the nightstand, the date glowing. March 14th, 5 years before my death. 5 years before Michelle's can't-miss bakery franchise would fail spectacularly. 5 years before my family would guilt, manipulate, and threaten me into co-signing her business loan. 5 years before that loan would destroy my life. I sat there trembling as the memories crashed over me like waves. Both timelines existed in my head simultaneously, the life I'd lived and the death I'd died. The psychological term is dual consciousness, though I wouldn't learn that until later. All I knew in that moment was that I had been given something impossible, a second chance. "Lena," my mother's voice carried up the stairs. "Your brother and Michelle are here." My blood went cold. In my first life, this dinner had been unremarkable. Just another Sunday meal where Michelle dominated the conversation with her latest business idea, while my brother David gazed at her adoringly. I had barely paid attention, too focused on my own job stress to care about Michelle's dreams of becoming a bakery mogul. This time, I would pay attention to everything. I walked downstairs on unsteady legs, my mind racing. The smell of my mother's pot roast filled the house, and for a moment, I was overwhelmed by the simple fact that I was home, that I was alive, that I had time. Then I saw Michelle's face, and all the sentiment evaporated. She sat at the dining table like a queen holding court, her perfectly styled hair catching the light, her designer handbag, the one David had gone into debt to buy her, perched on the chair beside her. She was beautiful in the way that had always made me feel small, polished, confident, effortlessly superior. "Lena!" She smiled with practiced warmth. "We have the most exciting news." I knew what was coming. Not today, but soon. First would come the enthusiastic presentations, the business plans printed on expensive paper, the market research that looked impressive but was fatally flawed. Michelle had a gift for making bad ideas sound brilliant. Sit down," my mother urged, already setting plates. My father was in his usual chair, reading the newspaper, only half listening. David sat beside Michelle, his hand on her knee, his expression one of pride and excitement. I had loved my family once, deeply, unconditionally. That love had survived even through the first year of the loan disaster, even as they told me to stop being selfish and think of the family, and Michelle worked so hard, you can't let her fail. It had finally died somewhere between the second bankruptcy attorney and the realization that not one of them would help me. Not one of them had even asked if I was okay. "Michelle's been approached by an amazing opportunity," David began, and I had to grip my fork to keep my hands from shaking. "There's a French bakery franchise, Boulangerie Belle, that's expanding into the U.S. market. Michelle would be one of the first franchisees on the West Coast. It's a ground floor opportunity," Michelle added, her eyes bright. "The kind that only comes along once in a lifetime." I said nothing. I cut my pot roast into precise pieces and chewed slowly, buying time to think. In my first life, I had been encouraging, supportive even. "That sounds amazing, Michelle. You'll be great at it." I had been genuinely happy for her, never imagining that her dream would become my nightmare. "Aren't you going to say anything?" my mother asked, looking at me with expectation. "It sounds interesting," I said carefully. "What's the investment required?" Michelle waved her hand dismissively. "That's all just details. The important thing is the vision. Can you imagine it? A real French bakery, authentic recipes, the whole experience. Americans will go crazy for it." The investment is around $850,000, David said, more practical than his wife. But the projections show we'll be profitable within 18 months. $850,000, the exact amount that would later be my burden to bear. That's a significant investment, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Where are you getting the capital? We have some savings, Michelle said, which was a lie. They had no savings. And we're getting a business loan for the rest. The bank is very interested. Very interested would turn into requires a co-signer within 3 months. I knew the timeline now as if it were written in my bones. 3 months of the bank reviewing their application, growing concerned about David and Michelle's credit history. David had a bankruptcy from a failed tech startup at 23, and Michelle had defaulted on student loans. The bank would want someone with a clean financial record to guarantee the loan. That someone would be me. In my first life, I had been the family's secret success story. While David chased get-rich-quick schemes and Michelle dreamed big dreams, I had quietly built a career as a pharmaceutical sales rep. I made good money. I paid my bills on time. My credit score was pristine. I was also the family's perpetual doormat. Too afraid of conflict to say no, too conditioned by years of being told, family comes first, to prioritize my own well-being. I think it's wonderful that you're pursuing your dreams, I said, and I watched Michelle's smile grow wider, never knowing that this time, I meant it as a farewell. Underscore, 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 underscore. The next 3 months were the strangest of my life, or lives, plural. I went through the motions of my job, but every spare moment was spent preparing. I didn't just want to avoid co-signing the loan, I wanted to ensure that when Michelle's business failed, and it would fail, I knew the entire trajectory now. There would be no possible way for anyone to touch me. First, I needed to understand exactly what had gone wrong in my first life. I spent hours in the library researching contract law and personal liability. I learned out that when you co-sign a business loan, you become equally responsible for the debt. If the business fails, the creditors can come after your personal assets, your savings, your car, your home if you have one, your wages. In my first life, they had come after everything. The bank had been relentless. When Michelle's bakery went under after just 14 months, turns out Americans weren't as hungry for $12 croissants as she'd projected. The bank had immediately moved to collect. Michelle and David declared bankruptcy. Their personal assets were minimal: a leased car, a rented apartment, some furniture. I, on the other hand, had been a gold mine. The bank garnished my wages. They seized my savings account. They put a lien on the modest condo I'd managed to buy. When I tried to explain that I had only co-signed as a favor, that I had never received any benefit from the business, they had been unmoved. Legally, I was just as responsible as if I had taken out the loan myself. My family's response had been worse than the bank's. "You're being dramatic," Michelle had said. "It's just money. You'll make more." "We're family," my mother had insisted. "You need to help each other." "Michelle works so hard," David had pleaded. "She's devastated. Can't you just work with the bank?" Not once had anyone asked how I would survive. Not once had anyone offered to help me. I had tried to get a second job, but between the wage garnishment and the stress, my health had deteriorated. My work performance suffered. I was eventually fired. Then I couldn't find another job because of my destroyed credit and the judgments against me. The spiral had been swift and merciless. This time would be different. I started documenting everything. Every conversation with my family, I made notes afterward. I saved every text message, every email. When Michelle started sending me glossy brochures about Boulangerie Belle, I filed them carefully. When David called to ask if I'd be willing to have a conversation with the bank about helping them secure financing, I recorded the call. California is a 2-party consent state for recording, but I didn't plan to use these recordings in court. I just needed them for my own protection, my own clarity. In my first life, I had constantly second-guessed myself, wondering if maybe I was remembering things wrong, if maybe I was being unfair. This time, I would have receipts. I also started building my Ironclad defense, First, I met with a lawyer. Not a free consultation, but a real attorney whose retainer I paid with money carefully saved from my paychecks. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she was a bulldog in a designer suit. I need to make myself judgment-proof, I told her. Patricia raised an eyebrow. No, that's an interesting goal for someone with your financial profile. May I ask why? I had prepared a story. I have family members who are financially unstable. I want to protect my assets in case they try to involve me in their debts. It wasn't even a lie. Patricia nodded slowly. There are legal ways to protect yourself, but I need to be clear. If you're planning to defraud creditors, I can't help you with that. I'm not planning to take on any debt, I said. I just want to make sure that if someone else takes on debt and tries to make it my problem, they can't. That's different. Patricia pulled out a legal pad. Let's talk about asset protection strategies. Over the next several weeks, Patricia helped me restructure my financial life. We set up a trust for my savings. I moved my investment accounts into my name alone, ensuring they were titled in a way that would be harder to attach. I even changed my direct deposit to go into an account at a different bank, one where my family didn't know I banked. But the most important thing Patricia helped me with was understanding the co-signing process itself. If someone asks you to co-sign a loan, she explained, the bank is essentially saying they don't trust the primary borrower to repay. You would be guaranteeing the debt. If they default, you're on the hook for everything. What if I just refuse? Then you refuse. They can't force you to sign anything. What if my family pressures me? Patricia's expression softened. Lena, I've seen this 1,000 times. Family members who think your money is their money, who think your good credit is a family resource. You have to set boundaries. You have to be willing to say no, even if it makes them angry. And if they cut me off, if they stop talking to me, then you'll learn who really loves you, Patricia said quietly. People who only value you for what you can give them aren't family. They're users. I thought about my mother's tears in my first life, how she'd sobbed that I was tearing the family apart by not being able to make the loan payments. I thought about David screaming at me that I was ruining his wife's dreams. I thought about Michelle's cold, contemptuous stare as she told me I was selfish for asking them to take responsibility for their own debt. I can say no, I told Patricia. Good. Practice saying it. In the mirror, to friends, to yourself. Because when the pressure comes, and it will come, you need to be ready. I practiced. Underscore 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 underscore. The first hint of pressure came in June, exactly 3 months after the Sunday dinner. David called me at work, his voice tight with stress. Lena, do you have a minute to talk about something important? I'm at the office, I said. Can it wait? Not really. It's about the bakery loan. The bank wants to meet with us, with all of us, on Friday. Can you come? My heart rate spiked, but I kept my voice steady. Why would I need to be at a meeting about your loan? They want to discuss the loan terms. Michelle and I thought it would be good to have family support. David, I support you, but this is your business venture. I don't see why I need to be involved in meetings with your bank, though there was a pause. The bank suggested it might be helpful to have someone with a strong credit history present. There it was, the opening move. I'm not co-signing a business loan, I said clearly. Another pause, longer this time. No one's asking you to co-sign anything. They just want to meet you. Why? I don't know, Lena. They just said it would be helpful. Can you just come to the meeting? For me? In my first life, I had gone to the meeting. I had thought naively that showing up to support them wouldn't commit me to anything. I had been wrong. The bank representative had been smooth, professional, understanding. She had explained that David and Michelle's credit history was concerning, but that their business plan was very promising. She had asked me about my job, my income, my credit score, just conversational questions, nothing formal. Then, at the end of the meeting, she had said, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, we'd be willing to approve your loan if you could provide a guarantor with a stronger credit profile. Someone like Miss Carter, perhaps. All eyes had turned to me. My mother, who had also been at the meeting, had looked at me with such hope. David had looked desperate. Michelle had looked expectant, as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion, and I, conditioned by a lifetime of being the good daughter, the helpful sister, the one who sacrificed for family peace, had said, I'd be happy to help. This time, I said, I'm not available Friday. I have work commitments. Lena, I'm sorry, David. I really can't, but I hope the meeting goes well. I hung up before he could argue further. For the rest of the day, I felt nauseated with anxiety. The old programming ran deep. The fear of disappointing my family, the guilt over saying no, the worry that I was being selfish. I had to keep reminding myself of how it had ended. Alone, broke, dying of a stress-induced heart attack while my family sent me texts calling me dramatic. That evening, my mother called. Lena, your brother told me you won't come to the bank meeting. Mom, it's their business. I don't need to be there. They just want your support. I support them, but I'm not getting involved in the financial side of things. No one's asking you to get involved. Her voice had that particular tone I remembered so well. Wounded. Martyred. They just want you there. Is that so much to ask? Mom, if all they want is moral support, they don't need me at a bank. I can take Michelle out for coffee to celebrate after they get approved. The bank wants to meet you. Why? A long silence. I don't know, honey. Maybe they just want to see that Michelle and David have family support? Then you go. I'm going, but they asked for you specifically. Because they want me to co-sign the loan. Lena, my mother's voice rose. Why are you being so paranoid? No one has asked you to co-sign anything. Not yet, I said quietly, but they will. How do you know that? I couldn't tell her that I knew because I'd lived it, because in another timeline I'd destroyed my life for a business that had been doomed from the start. So I said, Mom, banks don't ask to meet the sibling of a loan applicant just for fun. They want a guarantor. And I'm not doing it. You haven't even heard what they have to say. I don't need to. My answer is no. Lena Marie Carter, I raised you better than this. Family helps family. The old guilt rose like bile in my throat. In my first life, that line had worked. I had been so afraid of being a bad daughter, a bad sister. I had valued my family's approval more than my own financial survival. Mom, I love you. I love David. But I'm not co-signing a business loan, and I'm not going to a meeting where people will pressure me to do that. If they can't get the loan on their own merits, maybe that's the bank telling them something important. You're being selfish. Maybe, I said, and the word felt like freedom. But it's my credit, my financial future. I get to be selfish about that. My mother hung up on me. I sat in my apartment, shaking. Staring at my phone, it rang 4 more times that evening. David, then Michelle, then my mother again, then David again. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages escalated from pleading to angry to guilt-tripping. David, I can't believe you won't even come to one meeting after everything I've done for you. Michelle, I thought we were family. I guess I was wrong about you. My mother, your father and I are so disappointed. We didn't raise you to be this cold. David again. You know what? Fine. We don't need you. We'll find another way. But they wouldn't find another way. I knew that because I knew how this story ended. Underscore, 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 underscore. For 3 weeks, my family didn't speak to me. It should have felt lonely. In a way, it did. I had no siblings besides David, and my parents had always been the center of my world. But there was also a strange relief in the silence. No one asking me for anything. No one making me feel guilty for having boundaries. I focused on work, on building my savings, on strengthening the fortress Patricia had helped me construct around my assets. Then, in early July, Michelle called. Lena. Her voice was different. Softer, almost vulnerable. Can we talk? Every instinct I had screamed danger. What about? I owe you an apology. I was upset about the bank thing, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. I waited. The truth is, the bank did want you to co-sign, and I should have been upfront about that from the beginning. But I understand now why you said no. It's a big ask. I get it. This was new. In my first life, no one had ever acknowledged that co-signing was a big ask. They'd treated it like I was just adding my name to a form. No big deal. I appreciate you saying that, I said cautiously. I was wondering if we could have lunch. Just you and me. I want to clear the air. I thought about saying no, but I was curious about what Michelle wanted, and I wanted to see her in action, now that I knew what she was. Okay, I said. Lunch. We met at a trendy bistro in downtown. Michelle was already there when I arrived, looking polished and put together as always. She stood and hugged me, and I forced myself not to stiffen. You look great, she said. New haircut? Same haircut? Well, it looks good. We ordered salads we didn't eat and wine Michelle drank too quickly. She talked about the bakery plans, about how excited she was, about how hard David was working to make her dreams come true. He's such a good man, she said, and there was genuine love in her voice. I had to remind myself that Michelle wasn't a cartoon villain. She loved my brother. She was just also selfish, short-sighted, and convinced that her desires justified any means. He is, I agreed, which is why I feel so terrible about how things went down with the bank. Michelle leaned forward, her expression earnest. Lena, I know we asked too much. I know co-signing would be a big commitment, but I was hoping we could talk about alternatives. Alternatives? What if you didn't co-sign the whole loan? What if you just co-signed part of it? The bank said they might accept that. I had to admire the strategy. Start with the big ask, get rejected, then come back with a compromise that was still exactly what she wanted. Michelle, I'm not co-signing any part of a business loan. Not 10%, not 50%, not any percent. Her face fell. But Lena, no. You haven't even heard the whole proposal. I don't need to. My answer is no. Don't you want David to be successful? Don't you want our family to thrive? Of course I do, but not at the cost of my financial security. Michelle's expression shifted, hardened. Your financial security. You make a good salary, Lena. You could afford to help us. Having money doesn't mean I owe it to you. We're family. Which is exactly why I shouldn't risk my financial future for your business venture. Because when it goes bad, and most small businesses fail, Michelle, it won't just be a business relationship that's damaged. It'll be our family relationship. When it goes bad, Michelle's voice rose, you don't think I can do this? I think bakeries are very difficult businesses, especially upscale ones. I think the failure rate is extremely high, and I think that regardless of how hard you work or how talented you are, there are 1,000 factors outside your control that can sink a business. So you think I'm gonna fail? I think the odds are against you, and I think it's unfair to ask me to bet my financial life on those odds. Michelle stood up abruptly. I should have known. You've always been jealous of me. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. Jealous? You're jealous that David loves me. You're jealous that I have dreams and ambition. You're jealous that I'm willing to take risks instead of just being a corporate drone. In my first life, this would have devastated me. I would have spent weeks second-guessing myself, wondering if she was right. This time, I just felt tired. Believe whatever you need to believe, I said. But I'm not co-signing your loan. Michelle grabbed her purse. David was right. You've changed. You've become hard. I've become protective of myself. Same thing? She spat and walked out, leaving me with the bill. I sat there for a long moment, then pulled out my phone and texted Patricia. They're escalating the pressure. What should I do? Her response came quickly. Document everything. Do not engage. Stay strong. I paid the bill and went home. Underscore, 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 underscore. The silent treatment resumed. Oh, but this time it was colder. My mother's birthday came and went without an invitation to her party. When I sent a gift, it was acknowledged with a brief, formal thank you text. I knew what was happening. They were freezing me out, showing me the consequences of non-compliance. In my first life, this tactic had worked beautifully. I had been so desperate to repair the relationship that when they'd finally approached me again, I had agreed to almost anything. This time, I used the silence to prepare for what I knew was coming. Because here's what I remembered about the timeline. Michelle and David would eventually get the loan. Not from the original bank. They would be rejected there. But Michelle, desperate and determined, would find a smaller, more predatory lender willing to take the risk. The catch? The interest rate would be astronomical, and the terms would be brutal. Michelle and David, convinced they were on the cusp of success, would sign anyway. And then, 6 months into the business, when the reality of the overhead costs and the lower-than-projected revenue became undeniable, they would be in a panic. Unable to make the loan payments, facing default, they would need a miracle. That miracle would be me. In my first life, they had come to me when the business was already circling the drain. They'd cried, begged, and guilted. They'd brought my parents, who had pleaded with me to save the family. They'd told me that if I didn't co-sign a refinancing loan, Michelle and David would lose everything, their credit would be destroyed, their marriage might not survive the stress. I had co-signed. And then, of course, no, the refinancing hadn't been enough. The business model had been fundamentally flawed. Within 8 months, the bakery had closed. The bank had come after both loans, the original and the refinancing. And since Michelle and David had nothing, they had come after me. This time, I wasn't going to be available for the rescue. I spent August preparing my defense in detail. I worked with Patricia to draft a notarized letter stating my explicit refusal to guarantee any debts for David Carter or Michelle Carter. We sent copies to every major bank in the area, creating a paper trail that would make it harder for anyone to claim I had somehow implicitly agreed to be responsible for their debts. I also did something else, something that felt ruthless but necessary. I hired a private investigator to document Michelle's business setup. "What exactly are you looking for?" the investigator, a retired cop named Tom Warren, asked. "I want to know everything about this bakery. The real financials, not what they're telling the family, the location, the lease terms, the vendors, the projected costs. I want to know if this business has any chance of succeeding." Tom raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. "You want to know if you should invest?" "I want to know what I'm protecting myself from," I said. Tom's report came back 3 weeks later, and it was even worse than I'd feared. Michelle had signed a 10-year lease on a space in an upscale shopping district where the rent was $15,000 per month. The build-out costs for the bakery had been underestimated by at least $100,000. The franchise fees for Boulangerie Belle were structured in a way that heavily favored the franchisor. Michelle would owe them a percentage of gross sales, not net profit. Most damning, Tom had interviewed several other Boulangerie Belle franchisees. Out of 12 franchises in North America, 9 had already closed. The remaining 3 were struggling. The business model was fundamentally broken. The franchise charged premium prices for an authentic French experience, but Americans could get perfectly good pastries for half the price at local bakeries. The target market, wealthy customers willing to pay $12 for a croissant, was too small to sustain the overhead costs. "This business is going to fail," Tom said bluntly. "I'd give it 18 months maximum." "Probably less." 14 months, I said, remembering. "And you know something I don't?" "Just a hunch." I paid Tom's invoice and filed his report carefully. This was my evidence, my proof that I hadn't been unreasonable to refuse to co-sign. If anyone ever questioned my decision, I would have documentation showing that I had done due diligence and found the business to be a bad investment. In September, my father called. "Lena, we need to talk." My heart sank. Dad rarely got involved in family drama. If he was calling, it meant my mother had deployed her heavy artillery. "Hi, Dad. What's up?" "Your mother is very upset about this situation with David and Michelle." "I know. She feels like you're not being supportive of your brother's dreams." "Dad, there's a difference between emotional support and financial support. I'm happy to cheer David on. I'm not happy to risk my financial future for a business that has a very high probability of failure." "How do you know it will fail?" "Most restaurants and bakeries fail within the first year. It's just statistics." "But some succeed." "Some do, but those aren't good enough odds for me to bet everything on." There was a long pause. "Your mother wants you to come to Sunday dinner. Can you do that?" "Is this an ambush? Are David and Michelle going to be there to pressure me?" Another pause. "They'll be there, but your mother wants the family to be together." I thought about saying no, but I was curious about their next move, and part of me, the part that still remembered loving these people, wanted to see them. "Okay," I said. "I'll come." "Good. Sunday at 2. I showed up at my parents' house that Sunday dressed in armor. Not literal armor, but the psychological kind. I had rehearsed my boundaries. I had my responses prepared. I was ready. What I wasn't ready for was the sight of Michelle, red-eyed and clearly having been crying, sitting at the dining table while my mother comforted her. "Lena," my mother said, and her voice was cold. "I'm glad you could join us." David sat across from Michelle, his face drawn and exhausted. My father stood awkwardly by the kitchen, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. "What's going on?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew. "Michelle and David have some news," my mother said. Michelle looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "The bakery is in trouble." Underscore 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 underscore. Here's what had happened. They explained Michelle had found a lender willing to give them the loan without a cosigner. The interest rate was 18%, usurious, but Michelle had been convinced she could refinance to a better rate once the business proved successful. They had opened Boulangerie Belle in July, 3 months ago. The grand opening had been well attended. The initial press had been good. Michelle had been featured in a local food blog, but the daily sales hadn't materialized. Turns out, people didn't want to pay $12 for a croissant, no matter how authentic the French experience was. They didn't want to pay $8 for a coffee and $15 for a sandwich. The target market of wealthy foodies was smaller than projected, and even they weren't coming in daily. Meanwhile, the costs were crushing. The rent, the utilities, the staff wages, the franchise fees, it all added up to about $45,000 per month in fixed costs. To break even, Michelle needed to sell roughly 200 croissants a day, plus sandwiches, plus coffee, plus pastries. She was averaging maybe 50 customers a day. The math was brutally simple. Michelle was losing about $25,000 per month. She had savings to cover 3 months of losses, maybe 4 if they cut staff. After that, the business would collapse and the loan would default. "We need to refinance," David said. "Get a lower interest rate, extend the term, reduce the monthly payments." I knew what was coming. "But the bank won't refinance without a co-signer," Michelle said. "Someone with good credit to guarantee we can make the payments." All eyes turned to me. I sat down heavily. "No." "Lena, please," David said. "Oh, just listen." "No. You haven't even heard the proposal." "I don't need to hear it. The answer is no." My mother's voice was sharp. "Lena, your brother is drowning. He needs your help. He needs to close the business." The silence was deafening. "What?" Michelle breathed. "Close the business. Cut your losses. You've lost 3 months of savings, and that's terrible. But if you keep going, you're just going to dig a deeper hole. Close now, default on the loan, take the credit hit, and move on." "That would destroy our credit," David said. "Co-signing would destroy mine." "It's not the same thing." Michelle's voice rose. "You have a good job. You'd be able to recover. This is our dream. Your dream is bankrupting you because we need more time. If we just had lower payments, we could make it work. We could adjust the menu, do more marketing, build a customer base. Michelle, the business model is broken. You can't market your way out of fundamental economics. Your rent is too high, your prices are too high, and your target market is too small. Even with a refinancing, you're just delaying the inevitable." "You don't know that." "I do, actually." I pulled out my phone and opened the file with Tom's report. I hired an investigator to research Boulangerie Belle franchises. 9 out of 12 in North America have already failed. The remaining 3 are struggling. The franchise model doesn't work in the American market. Michelle's face went white. You investigated me?" "I investigated the business opportunity you were asking me to guarantee." "That's insane." "No. So what's insane is asking me to co-sign a loan for a business model that has a 75% failure rate." David stood up abruptly. "I can't believe this. You've been planning to say no this whole time?" "Yes. Because I knew this would fail." "How could you know that?" I couldn't tell him I had lived through it, watched it fail in another timeline, died because of the debt. So I said, because I did my research, because I looked at the numbers, because I wasn't blinded by the dream of owning a French bakery. My mother's voice was quiet, dangerous. Get out. I looked at her. What? Get out of my house. I don't want to see you right now. Mom, you come here with your investigations and your spreadsheets and your cruelty, and you have the audacity to call it wisdom. You're watching your brother's dreams die, and all you can say is, I told you so? I never said I told you so. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face. My mother's eyes were wet with angry tears. I thought I raised you better than this. I thought I raised you to be kind, to be generous, to put family first. But you've become selfish, Lena. You've become cold. I've become protective of myself. Same thing, my mother said, echoing Michelle's words from months earlier. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. Let me make something very clear. I love all of you, but I am not going to set myself on fire to keep you warm. I am not co-signing this loan. I am not refinancing this loan. I am not giving you money to prop up a failing business. If you want to keep the bakery open, that's your choice. But it will be with your money and your risk. Then we're done, David said quietly. If you won't help family when we need you, then we're done. The finality of it should have hurt more. Maybe in my first life it would have, but I had already lost them once, had already watched them abandon me when I needed help. This was just a preview of a future I had already survived. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said. I walked out of my parents' house and didn't look back. Underscore, 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 underscore. October and November passed in a strange limbo. I threw myself into work, earning a commendation and a small raise. I went on dates with a guy from my gym who was nice, but unexciting. I took up painting, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I did not hear from my family, but I heard about them. A former coworker who knew Michelle mentioned that Boulangerie Belle was running a grand reopening promotion, 50% off all items for a week. Your sister-in-law is really hustling, she said. You must be so proud. I smiled and said nothing. I knew what the promotion meant. They were desperate for cash flow, willing to operate at a loss just to get bodies in the door. It wouldn't work. Discounted pastries attracted bargain hunters, not loyal customers. Once the promotion ended, the customer base would evaporate. In December, I saw a news article that Boulangerie Belle had been named Best New Bakery by a local food blog. The photo showed Michelle beaming, holding a plaque. I felt nothing. Christmas came. For the first time in my life, I spent it alone. No invitation to my parents' house, no gift exchange with David, or no stilted conversation over dinner where everyone pretended everything was fine. I ordered Thai food and watched old movies. It should have been sad. Instead, it felt peaceful. On New Year's Eve, Patricia called me. I wanted to check in. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I said, and realized it was true. Family still not speaking to you? Radio silence since September. I'm sorry. That must be hard. It was at first. Now it's just quiet. The calm before the storm, Patricia said quietly. What do you mean? Lena, businesses like your sister-in-law's don't fail all at once. They bleed out slowly. Right now, she's probably using credit cards to cover shortfalls, maybe borrowing from friends, definitely not paying some vendors. But eventually the walls close in. And when they do, they'll come back to me. They will. And you need to be ready to hold firm. I thought about my first life, about how they'd shown up at my apartment in tears, how they'd begged and pleaded and promised it would be different this time, how I'd believed them because I'd wanted so desperately to believe that my family loved me more than they loved money. I'll be ready, I said. The storm broke in February. It started with a Facebook message from Michelle at 2 a.m. Lena, I know we haven't spoken in months, but I need your help, please. It's urgent. I stared at the message for a long time. In my first life, this was when I'd caved, when the desperation had felt too real to ignore. I deleted the message without responding. The next day, David called. I let it go to voicemail. Then Michelle called, then my mother, Then David again. On the fourth call, I answered. What? Lena? It was my mother, and she was crying. Please, you have to help. The business is failing, and they're going to lose everything. I told you this would happen. I know you did. And you were right. But they're in trouble now. Real trouble. The bank is threatening to call the loan. If they default, it will destroy their credit. They might lose their apartment. Mom, that's what happens when a business fails. But you can prevent it. You can co-sign a refinancing. No. Lena, please. Mom, I told you in September that I wouldn't do this. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. They're desperate. And I'm not, which is exactly why I shouldn't tie my financial future to their sinking ship. My mother's voice turned cold. I never thought I'd see the day when my daughter would be this cruel. I'm not being cruel, I'm being rational. You're being selfish. Yes, I said. I am. And I'm okay with that. I hung up. For the next week, the calls and messages continued. They escalated from pleading to anger to bargaining to threats. David, if you don't help us, I will never speak to you again. Michelle, I hope you can live with yourself knowing you destroyed our lives. My mother, your father is so disappointed in you he can't even look at your picture. I saved every message, I documented every call, I built my evidence file. And then, one evening in late February, they all showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find David, Michelle, and my mother standing in the hallway. They looked exhausted, worn down by months of stress. Can we come in? My mother asked. Every instinct screamed to say no, but I wanted to face this, wanted to have the conversation I'd been too afraid to have in my first life. Fine, but I'm not changing my mind. They filed in, sitting stiffly on my couch. Michelle looked like she'd lost weight. David's hair had gone noticeably grayer. My mother looked 10 years older. Lena, David began, we're here to beg you, not for us, for the family. There is no loan that will save your business, I said flatly. The model is broken. You need to close, take the loss, and move on. We can't do that, Michelle said. We've already invested everything. If we close now, we'll have nothing. If you keep going, you'll have less than nothing. You'll have debt you can't repay. Which is why we need you to co-sign, David's voice rose. Why, if we can refinance to a lower interest rate, we can reduce our monthly payments, and we can survive long enough to build a customer base. You've had 7 months to build a customer base? It's not happening. You don't know that? I do know that. I know that because I did the research you should have done before you signed a 10-year lease for $15,000 a month. I know that because the business model doesn't work. I know that because 9 out of 12 of these franchises have already failed. Michelle stood up abruptly. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? You've been waiting to watch me fail so you can say you were right. I've been protecting myself from your failure dragging me down with you. You're my sister-in-law. You're supposed to support me. I'm supposed to support myself. You're supposed to run a business that doesn't require a family member to risk their financial future to keep it afloat. My mother's voice cut through the argument. Lena, if you don't do this, your brother's marriage might not survive. The manipulation was so blatant it was almost funny. That's between David and Michelle. The stress is tearing them apart. Michelle is having panic attacks. David can't sleep. If the business fails, I don't know if they'll stay together. Then they should have planned better before taking out an $850,000 loan. We're your family, David shouted. How can you just sit here and watch us drown? And this, I realized, was the moment. The moment where I either stood firm or got dragged under with them. I stood up. Let me tell you what would happen if I co-signed your loan. You'd refinance to a lower interest rate. Your monthly payments would drop from, $12,000 to maybe $8,000? And for 2 or 3 months, you'd feel relief. You'd think you'd found a solution. They stared at me. But the fundamental problem wouldn't change. You'd still be losing money every month because your revenue is too low and your costs are too high. So you'd start missing payments again. And this time, when you defaulted, the bank would come after both of you and me. We wouldn't default, Michelle started. You would, because the business is failing. And when that happened, you'd declare bankruptcy. You'd lose the business, your credit would be destroyed, but you'd walk away from the debt, and I'd be left holding the bag. The bank would garnish my wages, they'd seize my savings, they'd destroy my credit. Whoa, I'd lose everything. You don't know that would happen, my mother said. Yes, I do. I looked at each of them in turn. And here's what wouldn't happen. You wouldn't help me. When I was drowning in debt from your business, you wouldn't sacrifice to help me. You'd tell me it was my own fault for co-signing. You'd tell me I should have known better. You'd tell me to stop being dramatic. That's not fair, David said quietly, isn't it? Where would you be right now if I had co-signed and then lost my job because of the stress? Would you be here begging me to help you, or would you be demanding I figure out how to pay the debt? Silence. That's what I thought. I walked to the door and opened it. I love you all, but I'm not setting myself on fire to keep you warm. Close the business, take the loss, and rebuild your lives. That's my advice. But whatever you do, do it without my credit and without my money. My mother stood up, her face cold. If you do this, if you refuse to help, then you're not part of this family anymore. The threat that would have destroyed me in my first life now just felt like confirmation. I can live with that, I said. They left without another word. Underscore, 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 Boulangerie Belle closed its doors in March, exactly 14 months after opening. I didn't hear about it from my family. I read about it in the same local food blog that had named it Best New Bakery just months earlier. The article was sympathetic but honest. The business model hadn't worked, the market hadn't materialized, and despite Michelle's hard work and genuine talent, the economics had been insurmountable. Reading it felt surreal. In my first life, this closure had been the beginning of my nightmare. This time, it was just news. According to the article, Michelle and David were pursuing bankruptcy protection. The business assets would be liquidated, but there wouldn't be enough to cover the loan. The lender would take a significant loss. I felt no satisfaction in being right, just a deep, weary relief that I wasn't being pulled into their financial disaster. I waited for the follow-up contact, the renewed begging, but it didn't come. My family had meant what they said. I was no longer part of them. In April, I ran into an old family friend at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me. Lena, I heard about Michelle's bakery. That must be so hard for your family. It is, I said neutrally. Your mother mentioned that there had been some family tension around it. I could imagine what my mother had said, that I had refused to help, that I had let my brother's dreams die, that I had chosen money over family. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is not enable their bad decisions, I said. The friend looked confused, then nodded slowly. I suppose that's true. I finished my shopping and went home. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Lena Carter? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Speaking? This is Janet Reeves from Western Commercial Bank. I'm calling about a loan guarantor issue. My blood ran cold. I'm not a guarantor on any loans. According to our records, you are listed as a co-signer on a business loan for Michelle and David Carter. That's incorrect. I never co-signed any loan. There was a pause. I'm looking at a loan application from February with your signature. My heart started pounding. That's impossible. I never signed anything. Miss Carter, we take fraud very seriously. If you're claiming this isn't your signature, I'm not claiming anything. I'm telling you I never signed a loan application. I never agreed to be a guarantor. And I have documentation proving I explicitly refused. Another pause. Can you come to the bank tomorrow? We need to sort this out. Yes, and I'm bringing my lawyer. I hung up and immediately called Patricia. They forged my signature, I told her, my voice shaking. They actually forged my signature on a loan application. Are you sure? The bank called. They think I'm a guarantor on a refinancing loan. But I never signed anything, Patricia. I swear to God, I never signed anything. Okay, stay calm. This is actually good news. How is this good news? Because if they forged your signature, they committed a crime, and you're not liable for a debt incurred through fraud. Patricia's voice was sharp, focused. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the bank tomorrow. We're going to request a copy of the loan application. We're going to get a handwriting expert to confirm the signature isn't yours. And then we're going to go to the police. I spent that night unable to sleep, my mind racing. Who had forged my signature? Michelle? David? Had they worked together? Ye convinced that I'd never actually follow through on checking? The next day, Patricia and I met at Western Commercial Bank. Janet Reeves was a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. She led us to a conference room and spread the loan documents across the table. "This is the loan application submitted in February," she said. "You can see here the guarantor signature section." I looked at the signature. It was a decent approximation of my handwriting, but not quite right. The loops were wrong. The pressure was inconsistent. "That's not my signature," I said. "You're certain?" "Absolutely certain. I have samples of my actual signature if you need them. And I have documentation showing I explicitly refused to co-sign any loans for David and Michelle Carter." I pulled out the notarized letter Patricia and I had drafted months earlier, the one we'd sent to every major bank. This letter, dated August of last year, explicitly states I refuse to guarantee any debts for David or Michelle Carter. You should have a copy in your files. Janet took the letter, scanned it, and then her expression shifted. "We do have this letter. It was flagged in their file." "So, when you received a loan application with my name as guarantor, knowing I had sent an explicit refusal, did no one think to verify?" Janet's jaw tightened. "The loan officer should have contacted you directly. That's standard procedure when there's a prior refusal on file." "But they didn't." "No, it appears they did not." Janet looked at the documents again, her face darkening. "Miss Carter, I'm going to need to escalate this immediately. If your signature was forged, this is a serious matter." "I want to file a police report," I said. "I'll have our fraud department contact law enforcement. In the meantime, you are absolutely not liable for this loan. We'll need you to sign an affidavit stating you did not authorize this guarantee." Patricia was already pulling out the necessary forms. "We'll need copies of all loan documents, including the original application with the forged signature." "Of course." As Janet left to make calls, Patricia turned to me. "Are you okay?" "They forged my signature," I said, my voice hollow. "My own family forged my signature." "I know. I'm sorry. I can't believe they did this. Even knowing what I know about how it ends, I can't believe they actually did this." Patricia's expression was grim. "Desperate people do desperate things. They probably convinced themselves it was justified, that you'd never actually check, that it would all work out. But it wouldn't work out. The bank would investigate, would discover the fraud, and would void the loan guarantee. Michelle and David would face criminal charges for fraud, and I would be free. The police took my statement that afternoon. Detective Morris was a tired-looking man in his 50s who seemed unsurprised by the story. "Happens more than you'd think," he said. "Family member forges a signature, figures the victim won't press charges because of the relationship." "I'm pressing charges," I said. "You sure? Once we start this process, there's no taking it back. Your brother and his wife could face serious consequences." "I'm sure." He nodded and made notes. "We'll need to interview them, get their side of the story. But with the bank's documentation and your notarized letter refusing to co-sign, this is pretty clear-cut fraud." A week later, David called me. It was the first time I'd heard from him since the confrontation at my apartment. "You called the police on us?" His voice was disbelieving. "You forged my signature on a loan application." "We didn't forge anything. The loan officer said it would be fine, that it was just a formality." "David, stop lying. I saw the signature. I compared it to my actual signature. It's not the same." A long silence. "We were desperate." "I know. We thought if we could just get the refinancing, we could make it work. And then we'd pay it back, and you'd never even have to know. Except the business failed anyway, and now the bank wants payment. And I'd be on the hook for $850,000. "You wouldn't have had to pay anything. We would have paid it." "With what money, David? You're bankrupt. You have nothing. If that guarantee had been valid, the bank would have come after me for everything." "But we're family. You committed fraud against me. You don't get to play the family card. Lena, please. If you press charges, we could go to jail. You should have thought of that before you forged my signature. We'll lose everything. Our credit is already destroyed. We might lose our apartment. Michelle is falling apart. And now this? I felt nothing. In my first life, this would have shattered me. Now, I just felt tired. I told you to close the business in September. I told you the model was broken. I told you I wouldn't co-sign. You did this anyway. These are the consequences of your choices. I can't believe you're doing this. Our parents won't even talk to you anymore. You're losing your whole family over money. No, I said quietly. I lost my family when you decided my credit and my financial future were less important than Michelle's dream bakery. I hung up. Underscore 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 underscore. The criminal investigation took 3 months. During that time, I heard nothing from my family. The silence was absolute. In July, almost exactly a year after Boulangerie Belle had opened, Detective Morris called me with an update. We've completed our investigation. The evidence is clear that your signature was forged. The bank has agreed not to pursue the loan guarantee against you, and we're moving forward with fraud charges against David and Michelle Carter. What happens now? The DA will decide whether to prosecute. Given that this is a family situation and they're first-time offenders, there might be a plea deal, but they'll face consequences. Probably probation, restitution, possibly community service. Will I have to testify? Possibly. Depends on whether they take a plea or go to trial. In August, David and Michelle's attorney contacted Patricia. They wanted to arrange a plea deal, but they needed me to agree not to pursue civil damages. They want you to agree that you won't sue them for the costs you incurred, attorney fees, investigation costs, etc., Patricia explained. In exchange, they'll plead guilty to the fraud charges and accept probation. What do you think I should do? Honestly, take the deal. Suing them won't get you anything. They're bankrupt. And this way, the criminal charges stick. They'll have fraud convictions on their records. That's a consequence they'll carry forever. I thought about it. About the sister-in-law who had called me jealous, who had dismissed my concerns, who had forged my signature rather than accept my refusal. About the brother who had threatened to never speak to me again if I didn't sacrifice my financial future for his wife's failed dream. I'll take the deal, I said. In September, David and Michelle Carter pleaded guilty to fraud. They were sentenced to 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution for my attorney fees, a judgment they would probably never be able to honor. The local news covered it. Local couple pleads guilty to fraud after failed bakery venture. The article was brief, factual, devastating. It mentioned that they had forged a family member's signature on a loan guarantee. I wondered what my mother thought when she read it. If she still thought I was the cruel one, the selfish one, the one who had destroyed the family. I would never know. She never called. Underscore 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 underscore. Life moved on. I got a promotion at work, a significant one that came with a hefty raise and more responsibility. I moved to a better apartment. I started dating a man named James, who was kind and stable and had no interest in get-rich-quick schemes. I made new friends, built a life separate from my family. Therapy helped. Doctor. Rosen was patient as I worked through the complicated grief of losing family members who were still alive, the guilt that lingered despite everything, the fear that maybe I really was cold and selfish like they'd said. You set a boundary, Dr. Rosen said. A reasonable, healthy boundary. And they punished you for it. That tells you everything you need to know about the relationship. But they're my family. Family isn't supposed to commit fraud against you. It took time, but slowly I began to believe it. In November, almost 2 years after my rebirth, I ran into my father at a coffee shop. We hadn't spoken since before the bakery closed. He looked older. The stress had carved new lines into his face. "Lena," he said, and there was something in his voice. Surprise, maybe, or sadness. "Dad, can we talk? Eat, just for a minute?" We sat at a small table in the corner. The awkwardness was suffocating. How have you been? He asked. Good. I got promoted. I'm doing well. That's good. That's really good. Silence. Your mother and we've been thinking a lot about everything that happened. I waited. David and Michelle lost their apartment. They had to move in with us. The probation, the community service, the bankruptcy. It's been very hard on them. I imagine it has been. Your mother still won't talk about you. She says you destroyed the family. The words should have hurt. They didn't. But I've been thinking, my father continued, about what you said. About how the business model was broken. About how we were asking you to risk everything for a dream that was never gonna work. I looked at him carefully, and I think maybe you were right. Not about refusing to help. Your mother will never agree with that. But about the business. We pushed David and Michelle to chase this dream without really looking at whether it was viable. We got caught up in the excitement of it. Dad, I did try to warn you. I showed you the research. I know you did. And we didn't listen. He rubbed his face tiredly. The thing is, now we're all living with the consequences. David can't get a decent job with a fraud conviction. Michelle is working retail, barely making minimum wage. They're in their mid-30s, living with their parents, starting over from nothing. That's not my fault. I know. He met my eyes. I'm not here to ask you for money or help or anything like that. I'm just here to say, I think I understand now. Why you said no. Why you protected yourself. It was the closest I would ever get to an apology from him. Thank you for telling me that, I said. Your mother won't ever come around. You should know that. She's decided you're the villain in this story, and nothing will change her mind. I've made my peace with that. Have you? He looked at me searchingly. Have you really? I thought about it. About the lonely holidays, the family events I'd never be invited to, the nieces and nephews I'd never know if David and Michelle ever had children, about the mother who would probably die still thinking I was cruel and selfish. I've learned to live with it, I said. That's close enough? My father nodded slowly. I miss you. I know I don't have the right to say that, but I do. I miss you too. Can I call you sometimes? Not about them. Oh, just to talk? I considered it. The potential complications, the ways it could be used against me, the possibility that it was a manipulation to draw me back in. But I also considered that this man had raised me, had taught me to ride a bike, had sat through my school plays, and graduated and cheered at my achievements. That people were complicated, that families were messy, that forgiveness didn't have to mean reconciliation, but could just mean letting go of the anger. You can call, I said, but I need you to understand, I'm not rejoining the family. I'm not coming to Sunday dinners or family events. I'm not giving David and Michelle money or help or anything else. If that's a problem, it's not a problem, my father said quickly. I just want to know how you're doing. Talk to my daughter once in a while. Okay. We talked for another 20 minutes, carefully avoiding the landmines of the past 2 years. He told me about his garden, about the new restaurant he and my mother liked. I told him about my promotion, about James, carefully editing out any details that could be used to pressure me later. When we parted, he hugged me. It felt both familiar and strange. I'm proud of you, he said. I should have said that a long time ago. I watched him leave, and for the first time since my rebirth, I cried. Not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd saved. Myself. Underscore 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 underscore. 3 years after my rebirth, I married James. It was a small ceremony. My father came, which was a statement in itself. My mother did not. David and Michelle sent a card with a generic message. No apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just, congratulations on your wedding. I threw it away without regret. 5 years after my rebirth, James and I bought a house. A real house with a yard and a mortgage and a future. We had saved diligently, had built our life together on a foundation of trust and honesty and mutual respect. I thought sometimes about my first life, about the woman I'd been who had died alone and bankrupt. She had been kind to the point of self-destruction, generous to the point of financial ruin, so afraid of conflict that she'd let herself be consumed by other people's needs. I wasn't that woman anymore. I had become someone harder, yes, more protective of my boundaries, quicker to say no, less willing to sacrifice myself for others' approval. My mother would call that cold, selfish. I called it survival. Underscore 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 underscore. 7 years after my rebirth, my father died. He had a heart attack. Quick. Painless, in his sleep. I got the call from a funeral home, not from my mother. The funeral was awkward. I sat in the back with James holding my hand. My mother sat in the front row, flanked by David and Michelle, and did not acknowledge me. Not when I arrived, not during the service, not after. At the reception, David approached me. He looked worn down by life, the easy charm of his youth replaced by a desperate tiredness. "Lena, thank you for coming." He was my father. I know, Mom wasn't sure you'd show up. I loved him. I'm here because I loved him, not because of her. David nodded. Awkward silence stretched between us. I wanted to say, he started, then stopped. I've wanted to say this for a long time. I'm sorry for everything, for what Michelle and I did, for forging your signature, for the way we treated you. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation. I saw only exhaustion and regret. "Okay," I said. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. What we asked of you was wrong. What we did was criminal, and you were right to protect yourself." I was. "Michelle and I are divorced," he said abruptly. 2 years now, the stress of everything, we didn't survive it. I thought about my mother's prediction, that the business failure would destroy their marriage. She'd been right about that, at least. "I'm sorry," I said, and found I meant it. Not sorry enough to regret my choices, but sorry that his life had taken this turn. "I'm working as a middle manager at a logistics company. It's fine. It's boring, but it's stable." He laughed without humor. "Everything you said about get-rich-quick schemes and chasing dreams instead of building foundations. You were right about all of it." "David, I never wanted you to fail. I just didn't want to fail with you." "I know. I get it now. I really do." He paused. "Mom will never forgive you, you know. She's decided this is all your fault. If you had just helped, everything would have been fine." "That's not true." "I know it's not, but she needs someone to blame, and she's chosen you." I looked across the room at my mother, who was accepting condolences from family friends. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by grief and bitterness. "I can live with that," I said. "I know you can. So you're stronger than any of us." David looked at me with something like admiration. "You always were. We just didn't see it." He walked away, and I didn't stop him. That night, James held me while I cried for the father I'd lost, and the family I'd never really had. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Setting the boundaries, protecting yourself?" I thought about my first life, the crushing debt, the destroyed credit, the stress-induced heart attack at 34, the loneliness of dying while my family sent angry texts about responsibility. I thought about this life, the house, the career, the husband who loved me, the financial security, the peace of mind. "Never," I said. "Not even once." Underscore 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 underscore. 10 years after my rebirth, I got a call from an unknown number. "Is this Lena Harper?" A woman's voice. None familiar. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Kate Simmons. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services. I'm calling about your mother, Patricia Carter." My blood went cold. "What about her?" Your mother is in the hospital. She had a stroke. We're trying to locate family members. I haven't spoken to my mother in almost 10 years. I understand, but you're listed as her daughter in her medical records. Are you willing to discuss her care? I looked at James, who was watching me with concern. What does that entail? Your mother is stable, but will need significant care going forward. We need to make decisions about her long-term placement. Your brother, David Carter, is listed as her primary contact, but he's indicated he's unable to take on her care. Of course he was. David had never been the responsible one. I'll come to the hospital, I said, but I'm not committing to anything. The hospital was the same one where my father had died. I found Kate Simmons outside my mother's room, a competent-looking woman in her 40s with kind eyes. Miss Harper, thank you for coming. How is she? The stroke was significant. She has partial paralysis on her left side and some cognitive impairment. She'll need full-time care. Where's my brother? He was here earlier but left. He said he couldn't afford to take time off work. I almost laughed. David, still avoiding responsibility. Can I see her? My mother looked small in the hospital bed, diminished in a way that was shocking. Her face was slack on one side, her left arm useless. She saw me and made a sound, angry or afraid, I couldn't tell. Hi, Mom. Lee. Her speech was slurred. Selena. I'm here. No, want you. Even in a hospital bed, partially paralyzed, she was rejecting me. Kate touched my arm gently. The stroke has affected her verbal processing. She may not mean... She means it, I said. We haven't spoken in 10 years. She blames me for everything that went wrong with my brother. Kate looked uncomfortable. I see. What are her options for care? She'll need skilled nursing. Her insurance will cover some of it, but there will be significant out-of-pocket costs. If she has assets... She doesn't. My father died 7 years ago. They were living on his pension and Social Security. Then we'll be looking at Medicaid placement. The facilities aren't ideal, but they provide adequate care. I thought about what my mother would say if our situations were reversed. If I had been the one in the hospital bed, would she have visited? Or would she have told David I was being dramatic, that I deserved whatever consequences I faced? I thought about the woman who had called me cold and selfish, who had demanded I sacrifice my financial future for my brother's failed business, who had supported fraud rather than admit I'd been right. I thought about Patricia Chen's words years ago. People who only value you for what you can give them aren't family. They're users. I can't take care of her, I told Kate. I don't have the resources, and honestly, I don't have the emotional capacity. We were estranged for good reasons. Kate nodded, unsurprised. I understand. We'll proceed with Medicaid placement. But, I paused, make sure she's somewhere decent. I'll cover the difference between what Medicaid pays and what a good facility costs. Not out of love. Out of, I don't know, the memory of who she used to be before she chose bitterness over her daughter. Kate's expression softened. That's very generous. It's the last thing I'll ever do for her. I looked at my mother one more time. She was crying, silent tears running down the functioning side of her face. Goodbye, Mom, I said. I walked out and didn't look back. Underscore, 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 12. Years after my rebirth, I sat in my backyard watching my daughter play. Emma was 5, bright and funny and fierce. She had James's kindness and my determination. My phone rang. David. We talked occasionally now. Brief conversations about nothing important. He was doing okay, had remarried, had a stable job. They had learned to live with the consequences of his choices. Hey, he said, I wanted to tell you before you heard it somewhere else. Mom died last night? I felt nothing. I see. It was peaceful. The nursing home said she just didn't wake up. Okay. There's going to be a small service. I don't expect you to come, but I wanted you to know. Thank you for telling me. A pause. Lena, she never forgave you. You know, even at the end. She still thought you were the one who destroyed the family? I know. I tried to tell her that you were right, that Michelle and I did this to ourselves, but she wouldn't hear it. It's okay, David. She was who she was. I made my peace with that a long time ago. Did you? He sounded curious. Make peace with it? I watched Emma chase butterflies across the lawn, heard her bright laughter. I thought about the house James and I had built together, the career I'd grown, the life I'd created by refusing to be destroyed by other people's choices. Yes, I said. I really did. After we hung up, James came outside and sat beside me. Your mom? She died. He put his arm around me. I'm sorry. I'm not sad, I said, testing the words. I'm not happy either. I just am. That's okay. Is it? Is it okay to feel nothing when your mother dies? She stopped being your mother a long time ago, when she chose to punish you for having boundaries. You don't owe grief to people who hurt you. I leaned into him, watching our daughter play. I did the right thing, refusing to co-sign that loan, protecting myself. I did the right thing. You did. Then why does part of me still feel guilty? Because you're human. Because you were raised to believe that family comes first, even when family is destroying you. Because undoing a lifetime of conditioning doesn't happen overnight. He kissed my forehead, but doing the right thing isn't always the same as doing the easy thing. And what you did was hard and right and brave. I thought about the woman I'd been in my first life, kind to the point of self-destruction, unable to say no, dying alone because she'd given everything to people who'd taken everything and demanded more. I thought about the woman I'd become, harder, yes, but also stronger, protected, whole. I thought about my daughter and the lessons I would teach her about boundaries and self-respect and the difference between family and people who use the word family as a weapon. I would do it all again, I said, every hard conversation, every broken relationship, and every time they called me selfish, I would do it all exactly the same. I know. Because I survived. In my first life, their choices destroyed me. This time, I saved myself. You did. Emma ran over, breathless and glowing. Mama, did you see? I caught a butterfly. I pulled her into my lap, this bright, beautiful child who existed because I'd chosen myself, because I'd refused to be dragged down, because I'd built a life instead of letting others burn mine to the ground. I saw, sweetheart. You were amazing. That night, after Emma was asleep, I went to my office and pulled out a file I'd kept for 12 years. Every document from the loan fraud case, every text message from my family, every piece of evidence of what they'd tried to do to me, I had kept it all, a record of my vindication. Proof that I'd been right, that my instincts had been correct, that protecting myself had been necessary. But I didn't need it anymore. I fed it all into the shredder, watching years of evidence turn to confetti. The past couldn't hurt me now. I had won not by destroying them, but by simply refusing to be destroyed. James found me there, surrounded by shredded paper. Letting go? He asked. I already let go a long time ago, I said. This is just making it official. We stood together in my office, in the house we'd bought, in the life we'd built. Outside, the world was dark and quiet. Inside, I was safe. I had died once, crushed by the weight of other people's dreams and my inability to say no. I had been reborn, given an impossible second chance. And I had used it to learn the most important lesson anyone can learn, that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's survival, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable. That family isn't who shares your blood, it's who respects your boundaries. I had built an ironclad defense not just around my assets, but around my heart. And when the storm had come, when my family had tried to drag me under with them, I had stood firm. They had called me cold, selfish, cruel, but I had called myself free. And in the end, that was the only opinion that mattered.